Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Well, today we're going to continue our Evil Elites Exposed series as the Great Awakening continues, and I'm going to show you how deep the rabbit hole goes as more people are finally waking up to all the issues and the inner workings of the elites behind the scenes. And if you do enjoy these videos, please give them a like and share them around. I know that first video got nearly 50,000 views. Our interview with Dr. William Baig had 40,000 views before that got taken down and we got a strike. All my content will also be available on Rumble, and I believe the algorithm is suppressing some of these videos. Pretty unusual to get 50,000 views on one, then only 6 on the next. So if you're missing the videos, they're not showing up in your feed, you can turn on notifications, you can check in on the channel, and as I said, share these videos around to make sure we do get the message out there. But I think more and more people are waking up to the fact that the mainstream media is blatantly corrupt. It's owned by the same people that own big pharma, big food, the banks. It's all connected to those elite people, and people are finally joining the dots together. So I like this quote from Candace Owen. She's got one of the top podcasts in the world now. Let me tell you, if you're not a conspiracy theorist by now, you are not an intelligent person. And I also like this quote from Senator John Kennedy when he got pushed saying on a few of these topics he was talking about saying, oh, they're just conspiracy theories. And he said, well, maybe we need some new ones because a lot of these old ones have turned out to be true. And the information, the overwhelming evidence showing a lot of this stuff and showing the initial cover-ups and the lies by the mainstream media and those in positions of power is now out there for all to see on platforms that don't censor. Here we can see a good chart just showing the loss of public trust in medicine the past few years since before the pandemic to now. Is it any surprise why that has happened? And Australia was one of those places that had the strictest lockdown and mandates. No surprise that during the week we saw Albo fly overseas and sign the UN's Pact for the Future. So what do you think about this as an Australian or anywhere around the world? You know that this is the plan of the WEF and the World Health Organization, the UN, these globalists that want complete control over all of us and to take away our freedoms and sovereignty. But we are having wins every week. The news is coming out. So this is a historic moment. A motion by Port Hedland City Council winning the majority vote, calling for the immediate suspension of these products. So this will now go to all the local councils, I believe, and they're demanding an answer from health officials and whatnot. So let's see what comes of all that. It was awesome to see Malcolm Roberts, who's been sounding the whistle, one of the good Australian senators that we do have about all these issues from the globalists, appear on Alex Jones and InfoWars. So a lot of these people that have been made fun of for their conspiracy theories over the past 10 or 20 years are now suddenly being taken a lot more seriously as they continue to come true. A lot of voices, well-respected, well-known people with good intentions coming out, Pat Cash, and saying, make sure you check out this First Do No Farm movie. You can only watch this on the website, I believe, at this stage, but keep an eye out for that one and watch it if you can, or check out the other platforms, Rumble, BitChute, and so on, where you can find this good content that isn't censored. Actor, singer, and model Holly Valance, another Aussie who's been talking about a lot of this health stuff as well, trying to sound the whistle and put her voice behind these doctors that are exposing this stuff. We saw Elle Macpherson recently get blasted by the mainstream media for her refusal to take chemo. She's in remission. Turns out she also didn't take certain products recently. This was an interview or a radio show where we had Health Minister on making some pretty crazy claims that you wouldn't expect from these sort of people. So a lot of this stuff, I've got to be careful what words I say and whatnot, not to trigger the algorithm, but I'll let you guys read these headlines by yourself. But we all know people and that have had a lot of these heart issues and things that seem to be going wrong all of a sudden the last few years. This was a huge study, 1.7 million kids, looking at the prevalence of these heart issues, and surprise, surprise, none of the kids that didn't have those products injected into them had any problems. So the big studies are coming out now, giving us the evidence that a lot of people have suspected. Some countries never took up these products, and now countries are finally pushing back, and Slovakia was one that also wants to ban these products now. Tucker Carlson, again, one of the biggest podcasts in the world, they're having these people on, having these conversations. People waking up to the fact that PCR tests, the gentleman that designed these came out and said this is not what they're used for. If you cycle them too many times, as happened during the pandemic, they can show anything. They can basically show 100% false positives. So a lot of it being exposed now for the scam that it was. Tucker Carlson again, talking to Patrick Bet-David, another podcast YouTube channel I've mentioned, one of the biggest in the world. They are discussing these issues openly and just saying it's really clear now that kids without and countries that don't give these products to their kids have got lower incidence of all these things. RFK Jr., he's been sounding the whistle, saying he wants to bring down big pharma and big food, make America healthy again. Talking about how the WEF is just a billionaire's boy club, want to control the world. Going to Davos, all these big elites meetings, saying one thing and doing another. A lot of these people got exemption from taking certain products, our government and health officials. All this has been admitted now. It's out there if you know where to look. China's declared George Soros a global terrorist, calling him the son of Satan, the most evil person in the world. So the rich and famous are slowly being brought down a peg. This is a great video and podcast I listened to during the week. Matt Barry, he's put out some amazing content lately. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. It talks a lot about the housing bubble in Australia and just how we should be one of the wealthiest nations in the world with all our coal, our other minerals, uranium for energy. But instead, we've got really expensive energy. We don't manufacture anything. We're hit with inflation because we have to now import all our goods because we don't make anything. And you compare that to other countries like Norway that have got that sovereign wealth fund. Australia should be one of the richest countries in the world. There's no way we should have, housing shortages and that type of thing with all the materials, all the cheap energy that we should have. Instead, so much money in our economy just goes towards housing and the banking system. The Millionaires Factory, this is the NBN. They've now lost $12 billion over the past 5 years. And the stuff that's coming out like Starlink, where people are probably going to have cheaper alternatives to this internet because it was so poorly done and so poorly rolled out by Australia compared to places like China that seem to be able to build a bridge in a weekend or roll out these huge infrastructure projects so efficiently and with low costs compared to how we do things in Australia. Another great tweet from Malcolm Roberts during the week, just talking about this, all this woke nonsense about equality and whatnot, and how we're going to have different laws now for different people, with these judges being informed with this new guidebook on how to go woke, that they should treat different groups differently and have different laws. That's not how the law works. This is over to the UK now. We've heard a lot about their plan to control food and whatever. So this is, a farmer's market. You're now going to get in trouble if you're selling apples that you've just picked. They're making it a law that you have to register chickens if you grow them at home. We've seen in other countries how they've banned any crops that aren't GMO, for example. Different countries where they've brought in GMO chickens and whatnot. And then you've got to use their pesticides and you've got to use their vaccines on the animals. All these things just taking away people's basic right to be able to grow and eat your own healthy food. It's just crazy how much they're trying to crack down, and most people are still asleep. So ticking back over to this big story around Epstein and now P. Diddy, that entire network and everyone linked to it. And don't forget, there's been people like John McAfee, Alex Jones I mentioned before, all the conspiracy theorists trying to sound the alarm. Mel Gibson, established actors talking about this for years, and it's finally all coming out. So we've seen one of Epstein's biggest victims, Virginia Giuffre, backing Donald Trump and saying she wants to see this Epstein client list released, the seized laptops, all the things that we never really got to find out who was well and truly involved. So that's why a lot of people are getting excited if Trump does get in and release that. And don't forget who went there the most and then denied the friendship and connections. It's all linked to everything that's happened the past few years, guys. And it's going to be wild when this comes out for the public that still don't believe or are aware of any of this stuff because it's not on their nightly news or the radio just yet. But trust me, it's coming. This is the CEO of Goya Foods in the United States, just talking about how the government is a middleman in all this child trafficking that's been going on. So, this isn't fringe stuff anymore, guys. So many people are sounding the alarm on all this. We've seen just a couple of days ago that Tim Walsh has been accused of some of this nefarious activity as well. More people have come out from different countries now, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there if he goes down now just weeks out from the election. This is an agent from the Secret Service confirming that, Hillary is one of the most evil people in the world, with all those emails and those laptops and the tapes that supposedly the FBI now have. Some of them have been floating around on the dark web and whatever. You can view those. But once this all goes public, people are going to be shocked. Some of these names that come out, as I've mentioned before, the Obamas, Bidens, and so on, with these victims that are now going on these other podcasts and sounding the alarm and coming forward. I think it's up to hundreds and hundreds of victims now that are wanting to testify in that Diddy trial that's been scheduled for early next year with that class action. All right, so it's Australia as well. I've spoken about how we're run by, it's just how politicians are now just puppets for the WEF and these other people that are making these decisions. And don't forget that we've been funneling all this money overseas to corrupt entities like the Clinton Foundation, the Gates Foundation. It's why we are their lapdog when it comes to instilling, lockdowns, mandates, new rules and laws, whatever they want us to do. And it's not surprised. We've seen, George Pell in Australia, now more government bureaucrats being named, not being named, the name has been suppressed, but being named in terms of being pedophiles and whatnot. So I expect to see more of this stuff as well. This is a great piece that came out during the week about Beau Biden. So most of you have probably heard about Hunter Biden and all the wild stuff he's been up to and the scandals and the laptop. But most people haven't heard about Beau Biden. Now, he dedicated his life to protecting kids and fighting this child trafficking, and he had some pretty big wins in some cases pretty early on. But then all of a sudden, no prison time for this kind of stuff. Just wild. And sure enough, he died in mysterious circumstances as well. And the list of people that tend to die mysteriously or get silenced around this stuff over the last few years is just wild, but it feels like it's finally coming out now, and there are good people in control behind the scenes that are going to put an end to all this corruption finally. So the media has been planting this seed of whether or not Hillary's going to become the nominee again, because there's rumors now that there's some stuff's going to come out in the next week that might even implicate Kamala Harris well and truly in all of this network as well. I just mentioned Tim Walsh. Does that leave Hillary Clinton or maybe even Michelle Obama, Big Mike, to come out and run? So it's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens there if all the Democrats continue to be exposed. We're so close to the election now. Another Alex Jones conspiracy coming true. So this is the Department of Defense expanding the domestic military's controls to use lethal force now on its own citizens. So if things get so crazy with all this coming out before the election, are we going to see some sort of complete martial law and lockdown in America? I'm not sure. It's certainly wild times. TD Bank, another huge bank, $3 billion fine enabling drug cartel money. We know it's all the big banks that do all this stuff and overlook it, but another huge fine that's not really going to hurt them, but we know that these are the people that have been funneling all the money for the elites over the years, all the big banks. So let's get to the weather and some of these hurricanes. So Hurricane Milton, huge winds, fourth strongest Atlantic hurricane in history, and people are starting to ask questions about the timing of these and where they're hitting and whatnot. Now, a lot of people in the US and around the globe are really upset that the victims, seem to get very little help. So I think they end up getting a $750 check that was actually a loan. It wasn't even a check. At the same time, while the US is still sending millions and billions of dollars to Ukraine, Israel, Lebanon, whatever it is, but they're saying they've run out of money for their own citizens. And this was from a FEMA preparedness meeting during the week. As I mentioned before with the laws, how can you say stuff like this? That it's no longer about getting the greatest good to the greatest amount of people. It's about disaster equity or equality. Like this is crazy. How can anyone legitimately be thinking like this? FEMA's job is to help people, and they seem to be missing or even blocking citizen efforts to rescue those affected by the hurricanes. But the big thing I want to talk about is weather control and manipulation, because this is all out there, these conspiracy theories, for the past 20, 30, 40 years, even longer. People have been talking about some of the experiments done back in the 60s to control hurricanes and manipulate the weather. So Project Circus is one to look into. Again, this is on Patrick Bet-David's podcast. They've got millions of followers. This isn't fringe stuff anymore. Edward Snowden sounding the alarm about HAARP. If you're not familiar with HAARP, look into that. There's now multiple of these HAARP stations all around the world that can heat up the ionosphere and affect the weather. And as I tweeted during the week, you can just ask ChatGPT about this. The top 10 weather control methods used by governments: hurricane modification, cloud seeding, hail suppression. I won't go through all the list. Now, some of these they say are only tested or unproven, never widely used. But if that's, some people in the comments were saying, oh, this is a conspiracy theory. Guys, if you haven't been around the past few years, when your government and the authorities and the elites pushed on products on the entire world that were unproven, untested, never widely used, that is not an excuse for saying, oh, that can't be true. So Hurricane Helene, this is state representatives and senators in North Carolina being briefed about weather modification technology, and they've come to the realization this was not a natural event. This is Dane Wigington saying that he spoke with members of Congress on the phone, and they're waking up and saying something is not right with these storms. I covered in last week's episode as well some of this stuff, but just have a look at these weather gurus that monitor all these different radars and whatever, saying, this has never happened before. Some of these storms we're seeing even across Europe. The hurricane that we saw hit last week, this was on the biggest lithium deposit in America. And it only took BlackRock 27 days to steal the land. A lot of residents were pushing back and saying, we don't want this here. Sure enough, it devastates their homes. The hurricane hits right where BlackRock has this contract where they wanted to build this huge mine. Now all the homes are gone. Is this just a coincidence, or do you think there's something more to all of this? One that hasn't really been in the news because of the hurricanes is this fire in Wyoming. Again, this was highlighted for its lithium content. 18 million tons of lithium in this area where these crazy out-of-control fires are in Wyoming. So this was another blaze we saw during the week, this huge biolab chemical fire. And Kenny Johnson died shortly after testifying, and he had been actively pushing for this biolab's closure that had the big explosion, the fire, spilled all this toxic gas and whatever into the environment. Elon Musk unveiled his robots during the week. So autonomous assistant, does this scare you, this sort of stuff? I've spoken about the power that Elon has. I do like the fact that he's allowing a lot more freedom of speech and on X, on Twitter at the moment, but it also worries me the amount of power that he has, with Starlink, self-driving cars, and now rolling out these futuristic robots. Would you trust one of these and have them in your home? What do you guys think about all of this? And are you going to get a personal robot? The last thing I wanted to mention was just this really topical discussion around everything that's happening in Israel and Palestine. And it's the first time we've seen some people in the US who have been traditionally very pro-Israel. I've spoken about AIPAC and all the money they own, all the politicians in the US and places like Australia. But this is the first time, just in the past week, we've seen a little bit of pushback. So calling for resolutions to be met, a ceasefire and so on. Israel targeting a French multinational company during the week. We've seen more stuff happening in Lebanon, Israel attacks on the UN, and so they're really rubbing some people up the wrong way. And I think just as I started recording, we were seeing some tweets coming out about one of the head Israeli chiefs actually being assassinated, which is interesting. We'll see what develops there, if that stirs up the pot for World War III. Last couple of things, government and some of these large studies now openly talking about how fluoride in water reduces the IQ of children. Still crazy to me that this is legal in Australia, the US, but banned in places like Europe. How can science be the same in two different places? Staggering stuff. And finally, this one, another one from Alex Jones that seems to be coming true. So this is atrazine. Atrazine is a widely used fertilizer, a lot of people have woken up to some of the links around fertilizer and pesticides, organophosphates, again, banned in Europe, widely used in the US and places like Australia. Atrazine is one that also used, and there's multiple studies now showing that it can actually seriously affect hormone regulation and converting testosterone into estrogen. There's multiple studies in frogs, tadpoles, and rodents showing that it can even change the sex from male to female. And this stuff is in our drinking water, off the farms into our waterways and so on. So again, remember, illegal in Europe. Why is it still used in places like Australia and the US? Hope you guys have enjoyed all that stuff going down the rabbit hole as we continue to watch the truth come out. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share these videos around, and I'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.